Welcome. With this video, today we will begin the supplementary book of class 10th, Footprints Without Feet, and we will cover the first chapter. The chapter is A Triumph of Surgery. Before going into the details of the chapter, let's see what the title is all about. A Triumph of Surgery. Triumph means victory. So the title means the victory of surgery. Let's go into the details of the chapter. There are mainly three characters in this chapter. Number one, Mrs. Pumphrey. Number two, a veterinary surgeon. What is a veterinary surgeon? A veterinary surgeon is a doctor who looks after the animals. Then the dog, the center figure of the entire story, Tricky. These are the three characters, and the entire story revolves around these three characters. So one fine day, when the doctor was driving his car, he saw Mrs. Pumphrey going around with the dog Tricky. And doctor was really worried after seeing Tricky. Tricky looked so unhealthy. Tricky looked fat. Tricky looked bloated. Doctor stopped his car and approached Mrs. Pumphrey. Before doctor could ask anything, Mrs. Pumphrey herself started giving the explanation that I am feeding this dog so well. I am afraid that it might not suffer from malnutrition. So I am giving all kinds of food, all the best food available. Malt, Horlicks, chocolate cakes, what not. You name and you have it. That kind of food was served to Tricky. Tricky too never refused food. Tricky was so greedy when it comes to food. You can serve food to Tricky any time of the day and Tricky would never refuse it. Never. So that became the reason of Tricky's not illness but the unhealthy life that Tricky was living. Doctor quickly understood that it would not be long before he heard from Mrs. Pumphrey about Tricky's ill health. They departed. Within some days, doctor's assumptions became the truth. There was a message from Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky is not well. Doctor immediately understood that what's the problem. Tricky had vomiting sensations. Doctor suggested Mrs. Pumphrey that he needs to admit Tricky to the hospital. Mrs. Pumphrey was in tension that how can I live without Tricky, and doctor has already made the plan that I need to keep Tricky with me for at least 2 weeks. Mrs. Pumphrey with a heavy heart, with a tension, got ready to allow doctor to keep Tricky for 2 weeks and go for the surgery. Mrs. Pumphrey, she thought it would be a surgery to treat Tricky now. Doctor himself thought, veterinary doctor that is, he himself thought I would myself go and bring Tricky to the hospital. So Mrs. Pumphrey would be little relaxed and would have some confidence that Tricky is in safe hands. Doctor went to Mrs. Pumphrey's house. Tricky was handed over to the doctor. With Tricky, there came a hell lot of things with Tricky. Tricky's balls, lunch ball, morning breakfast ball, lunch ball, dinner ball, blankets, toys and so many other things. The vet surgeon, hereafter I will call him vet surgeon. The vet surgeon, he saw the things and he rushed. He drove off. He understood there is no chance I can keep so many things in my car, and he rushed off. From the rear view mirror of the car, he saw the entire household was crying, weeping because Tricky had gone to some other place for 2 weeks' time. How could they survive without Tricky? Doctor reached the hospital. There, other dogs also were there. As doctor placed Tricky down, the other dogs, they came around and sat around Tricky. They started sniffing Tricky, they started to play with Tricky, but Tricky kept looking at them with dull eyes. Tricky had no energy to move. Tricky was so bloated, Tricky was so heavy. Doctor understood what is the treatment. Doctor understood that it's not the surgery or any medical treatment that has to be done over Tricky. It is just the change of lifestyle that is needed. First 2 days, couple of days, Tricky was not given any food, only water. The third day, a bowl was kept for Tricky. Tricky did not take much interest. Next day, when a bowl was kept little at a distance from Tricky, Tricky showed some interest. And from that day onwards, there were huge changes in Tricky's life. Tricky started playing with the other dogs, moving with the other dogs, and so on the things started happening. Well, during the process of recovery of Tricky, Mrs. Pumphrey would call the doctor and ask about the well-being of Tricky. But she would never be satisfied with the answers that the vet surgeon would give. Therefore, in between, sometimes she would send fresh eggs for Tricky. Sometimes she would send some wine, even brandy. Doctor accepted the eggs, the wine, the brandy that has to be given to Tricky. But he never gave those things to Tricky. In fact, he himself started enjoying the eggs, the wine with his friends, and he started having a luxurious life because of Tricky. So doctor was also tempted that I should keep Tricky for a longer period of time, because this fresh eggs, this wine, this brandy, they would continue to come in. The flow would be there. On the other hand, Tricky was recovering fast. The lifestyle of Tricky has totally changed. Started running, started playing with the other dogs, started having a controlled meal, started having a controlled diet. Tricky started recovering very fast, very quickly. But then doctor thought, I must not keep Tricky for long, because Mrs. Pumphrey is suffering. She is missing Tricky dearly. Therefore, one day he rang up and informed Mrs. Pumphrey that Tricky has recovered very well. You can come and take. Mrs. Pumphrey's joy knew no bounds. She was so happy. She quickly drove and reached the vet surgeon's hospital. There, doctor came, the vet surgeon. He handed over Tricky to Mrs. Pumphrey. Tricky looked so fit. Tricky looked so good, so nice, agile, active. That bloatedness, the fatty body that had, all disappeared. And Mrs. Pumphrey was so happy. And then she said that I don't have words to thank you, doctor. How should I thank you? This is a triumph of surgery. The last part of the chapter, the title comes. This is a triumph of surgery. And there also hides the irony of the chapter. There was no surgery involved. There was no medical process involved. It was just change of life that bring about the changes in Tricky's life. And they all bid adieu, they all bid goodbye to each other. And that brings to the end of the chapter. Before I end the chapter, the one question that is very important in this, that may be asked in a long question in the board exam, as a long question in the board exam, justify the title of the story or bring out the irony from the title of the story. So definitely the irony is a triumph of surgery where there was no surgery involved. It was a change of lifestyle that bring about the change in the Pumphrey's life. Tricky's life. Tricky became fit because of the change of lifestyle and not because of the surgery. On this note, I take your leave. See you again in the next video. Thank you very much.